My apologies, my computer is all again. Oh, never mind. It's coming around slowly, if you can just give me a minute. It's not coming around. Thank you for your patience. I'd like to go ahead and call the July 1st regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors to order. Our first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand and join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and I would like to ask Director Nichols to give our land acknowledgement.
We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Other peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community.
Thank you. May the Secretary please call the roll.
President Mason?
Present.
Vice President Hussein?
Present.
Director Nichols?
Present.
Director Mitchell? Present. Director Byrd?
Present.
Thank you. Tonight, let's see, we will go ahead and adopt the agenda. Dr. Salzman, will you please give an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public, good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the Superintendents Report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for strategic project monitoring, a segment for information discussion, a segment for unfinished business, a segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 7.01, the Superintendent's Report, the presentation was added. Item 11.01, Strategic Plan End of the Year Progress Report 2020-21, a typographical error was fixed in the presentation. And item 14.01, School Resource Officer Update, a presentation slide was updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted. Which takes us to item 6.0 recognitions, and we do not have any recognitions this afternoon, but we have a very full and robust recognition item in our next regular meeting, so I ask everyone to join us. Item 7.0 is the Superintendents Report, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Sussman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Board of Directors, and to the public. First of all, like Chairwoman Mason said, next month we'll be introducing our new leaders coming to Everett. I just want to say today, as we met them, what a great group we're going to have joining us. But a special thank you to Kathy Parker, Kelly Newcomb, Sam Lancaster, Larry Fleckenstein, and the entire team. We just had a beautiful day with everybody, and it was just wonderful, and I appreciate that. I'd like to get into some thank yous today. I always look at July 1 as the end and the beginning, and what a year it was. But I want to say, as I always say, thank you to the staff, and thank you to the teachers and to our community. But having said thank you to the school board, who stood with us during these most different times ever in public education, coming to every meeting and supporting the initiatives of the district. To the school board, I publicly would like to thank them. And then to everybody with a big thank you is this: it's time to relax and recharge. Take a few weeks and really celebrate and honor your system and recharge and connect with people you haven't connected with for a long time. So, as you can see on the beautiful slides, there'll be some great places that I hope many of you get to see. I know I'm going to try to see a few places this summer, and I promise you that we're going to enjoy it. So, again, thank you to the entire community, and especially to the leadership of the school board. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, and a thank you to you as well for leading us through this past year. You need time to rest and relax as well, so I hope everyone takes an opportunity to do so. Our next item of business is board comments. We do not have student representatives, so I'll start with Director Mitchell.
Thank you. I don't have any real peer comments this time, but after seeing a post today about our new administrators, want to welcome them. And also heard an interesting comment today about the presentation from our diversity and inclusion at work. She gave an analogy of diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. And I really thought that was nice. And she said that in her high school, moving high schools, she was at the internal TED Talk, moving high schools, how she was so nervous at 14, and how the teachers really did invite her to dance. And that's how we got her where she is today. And you know, I think that was just an interesting analogy, and I really hope that that's what we see in our schools when they reopen in September. Enjoy the summer.
Thank you. Director Nichols.
No other comments besides, I hope everybody has a good summer. Have a nice vacation if you're taking one, hopefully you watch.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, as it has been said, relax, recharge, and I'm asking parents to do one thing different. I know it's been a challenging year for your students, but I am asking that you take this time to take your children to the library, pick up a book, continue reading, continue opening up new ideas, new pathways, new adventures for your children through books. Please allow them great opportunities to pick up as many books as they possibly can and read this summer. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you. And Director Burke.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's odd not to be with you today with my colleagues on the dais. And I do want to say thank you again to all the staff, administrators, and teachers that have, and our superintendent that has really gotten us through this year. But kind of on the note of Director Lessens is just for the parents, a big thank you for being partners with us this year. I really feel like our parents became kind of our teaching partners, our partners in education, our partners in making a difference. I'm excited about the opportunity to relax and recharge. That's one of the reasons why I'm not with you tonight in person. But that said, I'm excited for the new directions that we're going to be coming out of this public health crisis in and going as a district. because I think they're just exciting things on the horizon, and I'm excited to continue partnering with parents and continuing to support staff and teachers at all of our schools as we move forward out of this incredibly trying time. So thank you all.
Thank you. I too want to say thank you, and it feels like those two words are just not enough for the appreciation and gratitude that our district has given everyone, I mean, community, parents, administrators, teachers, staff, everyone from the top down, bottom up. It's been an incredible year, and I'm excited about next year and the opportunities, the things that we've learned this year and how they're going to make us stronger and grow us better when we come back in the fall. So I'll be looking forward to that after we all rest in the next. Okay, with that, our next item of business is public comments. And tonight we do have one person who would like to address the board, and I would ask that Mr. Glazer come to the podium, please. I would read all the details, but I think you've been here before and are familiar with the three lights on the podium there. And when the green light pops up, you will.
Could I ask, may I take, so I'm getting fogged up.
Yes, it's
And
not
people have been
required,
saying
so
that to me
please,
for
yes.
years.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm coming representing the Snohomish County branch of the NAACP. And I'm speaking regarding SROs. Armed personnel do not belong in any educational institution. It is completely antithetical to what school is and what school should be. The fact that armed personnel wander the halls of our secondary schools creates in and of itself that something is going to happen or waiting to happen. Having armed personnel who represent an organization that has and is disproportionately targeting people of color does in and of itself create an us versus them situation and situations. The term school resource officer is an oxymoron, but we have absolutely no idea what resource the officer is providing. The visual and personal trauma that many students of color feel when seeing or interacting with the police is real, right now, and never ending. The extensive, so-called extensive training that is required in the RCW for the officers that work in schools, exactly how many hours for each item in the RCW, who does the training, what are their qualifications in the training subjects, and where does it take place? How is the training evaluated as to whether the people being trained get it? How and in what manner are the so-called trained people evaluated in an ongoing manner? Personally, I do not know of a teacher or educator who receives anything near such training. In addition, the contract between the district and the county sheriff does not indicate any training. Everett Public Schools is not even looking at ending having armed personnel in the schools. This position, I feel, was made in isolation by a group of mostly white administrators who speak from a position of privilege, not looking at what the police do to our communities of color and what emotional trauma is being felt by these communities. It is not a question of whether these armed police in our schools around our children are good or nice people. The fact is that they represent an organization, a force that in many cases is systematically racist and biased, is harmful, is destructive, and yes, deadly. It is most ironic that you'll be discussing extending the police in the schools program. Ironic in the sense that we have just finished celebrating Juneteenth. For one, the police have been and are being used as a means of intimidation and oppression, and Juneteenth is a celebration of freedom and emancipation. Until such time as parents and guardians of children of color do not have to have the talk with their children, police do not belong in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glazer. Appreciate you coming here and sharing your thoughts this afternoon. And I hope that you have an opportunity to stay for the school resource officer update later in the meeting. Okay, our next item of business is the consent agenda. Dr. Salzman, an overview, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and Board of Directors, and public. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, or current contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask that questions or consider a discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received no questions regarding items on the consent agenda. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The consent agenda is adopted. That takes us on to our strategic progress monitoring item tonight. And we have a end-of-year progress report on the strategic plan. And we have Mr. Gunn to get things started.
Well, good evening. So tonight is the strategic plan end of year progress report. I have the pleasure, once again, I do this twice a year, once at the mid-year and one at the end of the year, of leading a team presentation to highlight the progress made this year to implement our district's strategic plan. This presentation accompanies a written end of year strategic plan progress report that's attached to board docs, and it also highlights the work of the district. So this presentation is highlighting the components in that report. And it was a year to remember. The words hybrid, concurrent, and remote will always and forever have a special meaning for all of us, I'm sure.
And asynchronous, it seems.
And asynchronous, and I could come up with others, and I'm sure others could too. Anyway, the work that is described in this report and the presentation was accomplished by the entire district, from the student in the at home or in their classrooms to the teachers in their classrooms or at their homes, to the boardroom, all the way in that whole range. The report itself is designed to be an easy to follow overview of our progress, much like an executive summary. And it provides the reader with a variety of links to board agenda items and documents on our district's website that the reader can go to if they want to dig deeper into a specific topic. So I'm going to go to the second slide, but first I'm going to point out that this graphic on the left side of our screen up there is for the current strategic plan. That is the one that we've had for the last 10 years. This shows the 5 strategic priority areas of that. So I'm going to start off first the presentation with a look to the future. And this is the priority student outcomes for the next 5 years or so of our new strategic plan. And I will cover these in a little bit more detail later. But I did want to point out that these are the primary focus of our new strategic plan. So I'm going to mention those briefly. Ensure 3rd grade literacy, increase science achievement, increase math achievement, reduce the achievement gap, ensure students are prepared for college and career, and then to strengthen student wellness, engagement, and safety. And we will have a lot of information to share with you over the next year and over the next 5 years about those progress in those areas. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the teaching women. Thank you, Mike.
Good evening, everybody. The four pillars established by Dr. Saltzman permeate each strategic priority, as Mike mentioned. And in the case of leadership development, we're pleased tonight to highlight a few of those pieces that anchor our work. One of the most important things that we can do as an instructional leadership team is hire, retain, and develop highly effective educators. And we celebrate that today in such a great cadre of folks that are joining us and coming on board for the fall. The new administrator induction, which again is sort of more familiar to us as the bus tour, focuses on critical instructional and operational systems that new leaders must know and be able to do to effectively launch the school year. The Summer Leadership Institute engages 115 administrators and supervisors in threading the key professional learning priority areas for the year that will be cascaded down into school improvement planning and learning improvement days at the school sites. The new teacher orientation, as you know, does the same thing in effect as the new administrator orientation, in that it introduces and deepens the knowledge and navigation of skills and systems for new employees. The Preparing New Principals program is a program that lasts throughout the year and invests in growing the leadership capacity of assistant principals who aspire to be principals by focusing on critical leadership skills and opportunities to demonstrate and receive feedback in real time on actual practice. The New Leaders Academy affords first-year principals and assistant principals the cohort to extend their on-the-job learning and sharpen their practice and understanding of key systems. And finally, as part of our ongoing leadership development investments, we convene leaders monthly in large and small groups to collaborate around systemic improvement topics that are timely as well. Just briefly, one of the professional learning highlights of this year, and you heard a little bit about it at our mid-year, was October 16th. It was a fantastic day. We hosted the district-wide Learning Improvement Day. The theme, as you can see here, was Stronger Together, strengthening practices for equitable outcomes. Of course, the anchors were strengthening equitable outcomes, best instructional practice, leveraging learning management system technology, and ensuring staff are engaged in social emotional learning for our students. We had 109 unique individual courses taught by our staff, and so the internal capacity tapped that day was remarkable and extraordinary, and with several opportunities to collaboratively reflect throughout the day together in teams. We were proud to run 27 instructional reviews during remote learning, which was a challenge, yet it paid dividends in the sense of being able to see classrooms, but having it be limited by the virtual environment. But nevertheless, it was a celebration. Several improvement themes surfaced across these 27 IRs. Math achievement across all grade levels, rigor and engagement in learning tasks, targeted supports for ELs and students with disabilities, supporting staff working collaboratively to deeply understand and unpack what those standards require of students, analyzing student data, and strengthening our continuous improvement process. And finally, every month or so, as you know, since early winter, our team provided a reentry planning update to the board. These key pieces in these recurring reports, if you recall, were the work on developing instructional schedules, highlighting best instructional practices, status updates on attendance and engagement, community engagement, like the Let's Connect events and highlighting the outcomes of those, and of course, recurring health and safety operations and advancements.
In the area of the second strategic priority area of inspiration, innovation, and information, the providing tools for collaboration and communication being available during the course of the year, our focus was choosing one LMS, one communication platform to use for that virtual classroom. And you can see as the year progressed and students returned to campus utilization continued to rise throughout the year, from the beginning of the pandemic throughout the remote learning, even through hybrid. During the year, staff plan for balancing in-person meetings with Zoom drop-ins, continuing for greater support without taking time away to travel with the frequency and support the drop-ins do offer. The next steps for asynchronous instruction in the blended environment will be building off these tools like Canvas, discussion boards. You can see how the students utilize those. Ways to give students more voice, more than one avenue. Creation by teachers has been high, shifting professional development to increasing student creation of media will be a key moving forward. In the other area of community engagement and communication, we refreshed the district website at the beginning of the school year. One of the focuses of that was to continue, and we've continued to make refinements throughout the year, but it was the idea of making sure that we had information that was accessible, along with our new design, some ease of access, people able to find information quickly, and usability. Continue to make that a focus throughout the year. We had Let's Connect monthly meetings, sometimes at the district level for things like strategic plan and financials, sometimes held by region, and for things more directly related to how kids need support for teaching and learning. Parent University continues to grow in quality and content and in views. New resources are made based on community questions and input. Engagement is growing throughout our social channels with amazing growth in all of the social platforms, see reflected here. The district communication tool, Remind, its first full year of use. And you see the number of Remind messages. This is our avenue of being able to use texting as a way of communicating. You can see the number of messages. Messages include announcement, conversations, reactions, but you can see the high number, so we know it's being increasingly utilized as a way of connecting our students and families to teachers. And online enrollment, that, as I've said before, is another avenue we have connecting with our families, and especially in this time of remote and distance learning, making sure we have updates and knowing where they're at and having those contacts is important. So utilizing this tool, even since this, we're up over 7,000 updates completed already for next year. Continue to make that a focus in outreach.
So on the next few slides, our team would like to briefly share an end of the year update for curriculum and some assessments. We are in the third full year of the district-wide implementation in iReady, and it is more important than ever because of the critical data point in both math and reading achievement. Though it was administered remotely this fall and sometimes in winter, 94% of our students in the mandatory grade levels, that's grades 1 through 5 in mathematics and grades 3 through 5 in reading, completed the diagnostic assessment in the fall, and 94% completed in the winter as well. So of the students tested in mathematics, 38% were at or above grade level in the fall, but this increased to 50% in the winter diagnostic. Following the winter diagnostic, we did leadership, professional development leadership, and they were transitioned to the building principal, who had opportunities for collaborative planning with other principals. In reading, you'll see in grades 3 through 5 here, those are the mandatory grade levels for iReady, and of the students tested, 49% in reading were at or above grade level in the fall, and this increased to 59% in reading on the winter diagnostic. So for both reading and math, students made an increase from fall to winter, and at the time of this report, we only had the winter data. Spring is optional, and that is not, and it was not finished at the time, but we are excited about some of the growth that we've seen. Performance Matters is professional development began with district and building administrators and helping them to just not only navigate the site, but also build a scoreboard and baseball card reports. We taught them how to do teacher dashboard navigation and assessment administration. And then building instructional coaches and teacher leaders were also trained in teacher dashboard navigation, report writing, assessment administration, and item analysis. Building leaders had individual sessions to review critical leadership targets in preparation for implementation in their buildings, and the building implementation varied with skill and capacity. Principals were just recently surveyed in May regarding their need for support and to ensure that all staff have the skills to use this powerful tool in the next year. And it really helps to guide the school improvement planning. So we're continuing to work on professionally developing our leaders and teachers to be able to optimize the use of this tool in the fall. But we're really excited because the use of this data, actually, if you take a look from January to May, the number of assessments built was, almost tripled. So that's pretty exciting for us. And then one of the things that we're most proud of in the academics team is the adoption, 2 successful adoptions of both in illustrative math, K-5 math adoption, as well as the American Reading Corporation for dual language for the Spanish language arts program. This is the first year that we've had a coordinated and aligned K-12 mathematics system, and we're really excited about that. We're just started some professional development last week with some of our teachers to get that moving. And the Spanish language arts curriculum adoption, we're really excited about the dual language program that's starting at Emerson Elementary. And both of these processes, one of the pieces we're excited about is that both of these processes were very inclusive with parent and community representation, on both of those teams, which resulted in a well-vetted, guaranteed, and viable curriculum for our students.
I'll raise a point of order, please. So mask policy here in the district has not changed, correct? Because we're having speakers come up, take off their masks to speak. That's not part of our policy, right?
I'm going to refer to Dr. Saltzman on that.
I just want it to be consistent. If there's a change, great. If there's not, let's just be consistent.
There is not at the time, we just, because of the speaker level, but we're asking everybody, please keep your mask on. That was correct.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. So recently the board received updates on recruitment and retention from the Equity and Access Council, as well as Human Resources presentation on continuous improvement. In the area of professional development, there's ongoing training for paraeducators to meet the fundamental course of study. Those requirements. New this year was offering support class for paraeducators regarding the e-certification system. Some of the fundamental course of study trainings were recorded and are now available through asynchronous learning. However, the state does still require synchronous learning and some in-person learning. Principal training was provided in the TPEP student growth goal cycle, the adjustments that were made by OSPI during COVID, and training was provided for certificated substitutes to prepare for successful guest teaching in a remote environment, such as accessing curriculum, providing high-quality instruction in a remote environment, and responding to student needs. In regards to labor management and negotiations, labor management meetings continue with both classified and certificated employee groups. We have full openers with 6 collective bargaining agreements: the Everett Education Association, paraeducators, the Service Employees International Union, Teamsters, nurses, and trades.
Boy, when I think back over the last year and a half, I can't think of more of a challenge for effective resource management than what we've walked through. The work that we did under Dr. Saltzman's direction last spring, of starting early, of initiating cuts, of saving resources, and a year ago today, we were facing an $8.8 billion state shortfall. We began to anticipate that enrollment would not come in. Again, under Dr. Saltzman's direction, we held on some elementary positions. That was confirmed by our elementary principals. We furloughed individuals, and we began to freeze salaries. Through the year, we went through a path that we walked, is a path untraveled, not in my 20 years of history, of trying to be adaptive to an ever-changing start of school, to trying to be adaptive to what the impacts are with our legislature, to continuing to use our federal dollars effectively. And we'll talk about that later, but I would just say that collectively, when I look at other districts, we're on par with some, but I'm proud of the work that our internal administrative team did and the work that the board did in terms of supporting our decisions and walking through that year. So aside from clean audits, aside from our normal par of standards of measuring our KPIs, I just think I'm here tonight to say I'm really celebrating a tremendous year of effective resource management.
So, Woodside Elementary School modernization is completed. It was the last major project of our 2016 capital levy program. The projects in design or construction still throughout the district include those funded by the capital levy, as well as a variety of other projects and other funding sources. You can see the list there: new boilers, painting projects, parking lot paving. We're doing Silver First parking lot this summer. Reader boards at 5 different schools, water bottle filling stations, flooring, bleacher seating at Evergreen, portables as needed throughout the district. Security fencing at the new, at our North End bus facility. And we will be continuing the conversation with the board. It's actually an ongoing, forever conversation, really, about obtaining the capital funding needed to continue to modernize and build new facilities needed for new students and for buildings that are getting old and systems that are getting old. So now it's back to the strategic plan, the refresh process that we went through. It took about 10 months. Typically, this kind of a process would take longer. We got a little bit slower start on this because of our focus on COVID about a year ago. And so then we decided to stay on track with the idea that notwithstanding the fact that we are in a COVID environment and struggling to figure out new ways of offering instruction and keeping our kids and our staff well, we knew that we could learn a lot from this and use this in the development of our new strategic plan. So anyway, there were 3 phases on the strategic plan starting in September. The first phase, analysis, and that's where our consultant worked with us to gather data about our performance and about our environment and about best practices in other organizations. And then put together a strategy development phase where we use that to develop the priority student outcomes and strategic themes. We shared that with our community and with the board, received input, feedback, and then put together a team of about 40 staff members to develop the objectives and the measures and the initiatives. And then from that, we went into phase 3 action planning. We just recently finished that and have allocated the funding now needed for the first year of implementation. As we move forward between now and August and actually into September, we will be developing the monitoring and tracking process. We'll be talking with you more about that at your August workshop, about building in some monitoring points in time for your next year's board agenda process. So the framework for the new strategic plan, you've seen this slide many times. A little while ago, I referred to the priority student outcomes on the left. And those are, those are the areas where we have the greatest opportunity to improve student results. And we identified these during a process, as I said, based on an extensive review of our performance data and conversations with our community. And the way to achieve those outcomes is represented by the strategic themes. And those are areas where we have to enhance, redesign, or create transformative change in those areas of our operations. So that's those are the strategic themes, and I'll cover those briefly. Theme A focuses on each student experience with learning by making learning meaningful and removing barriers. Theme B addresses instruction and ensures that we have effective practices in every classroom that meet individual student needs using research evidence-based practices. Theme C will ensure that all of our students have access to the appropriate resources for their education. Theme B addresses the importance of allowing individual teachers and school administrators to be innovative, at the same time ensuring consistency in key processes. Theme E focuses on continuing our community engagement efforts. We have already made a lot of improvement and a lot of progress in that area. This continues that work. And then theme F ensures that the people that work within the district are in the right place and are well prepared, and we invest in them to do this work. And then I started the presentation today with the priority of student outcomes for the new strategic plan, and here it is again. In closing, I wanted to mention that the tagline off on the left side, the Inspire, Achieve, and Thrive, that's for our new strategic plan, but it has roots directly in the mission of our current strategic plan. What it does, it takes the three most, in my view, most active verbs in the mission statement and puts them into that tagline. The mission statement itself, the complete one, is inspire, educate, and prepare each student to achieve to high standards, contribute to our community, and thrive in a global economy. So again, inspire, achieve, thrive is a connection with the old and the current the mission to the new strategic plan. And that concludes our presentation tonight.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would go ahead and ask directors if you have a question. Please go ahead and address this for them. Director Mitchell?
I just have a question for,
Very quickly, sir. Can we have the presentation taken down to the director?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question about the iReady. I'm wondering, why is spring optional? Because it does not give us a full view of the school year and where kids land until we review in the fall, freshman fall. Or did I misunderstand?
So some of that is negotiated in the teachers' union contract. What I can do is I can get more information for you about why that decision was made when we did that.
I had a question about the same topic.
Yeah, me too.
By the way.
Sure.
My question was really about a comparison, those percentages that you gave us and how they compare to fall winter 2020 or perhaps the 2019 SBA on math and ELA.
So
Same question.
it sounds like what would be helpful is perhaps a comparison with the iReady data and the last available SBA data that we have.
Yes.
We can put that together and provide that for the board.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Need it in context a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
I know it's all I have, thank you.
Director Bird? You have any
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And again, sorry about not being there in person, and sorry about the bad lighting. It's kind of bugging me. So that said, thank you for the report. It's great to see how far we've come as a district. I think a couple questions I had, the slide about the effective virtual learning, and it brought me back to a statement. I don't know if it was Dr. Scott or if it was Mr. Beckley who had said it earlier this year, but just really tracking how students show up. And so I'm wondering, as we move back into our traditional classroom settings, will we still allow for, and I'm not saying hybrid, but will we still allow for students to show up? Because I like that terminology, effective, and I just wanted to take out the word virtual, but we're tracking effective learning, right? With those Canvas ticks and those outreaches to parents and families. So will that continue into the fall?
It certainly will, Director Berg, in the sense that our primary concern is to keep them engaged. We're looking forward, obviously, to 100% in-person learning in the fall, but leveraging the things that we've learned throughout with 100% remote learning and then through hybrid, specifically in content management like Canvas. The idea of monitoring and tapping into that flexibility and creativity for kids to expand the options of demonstration of what they know and are able to do, expand the notion of what assessment data looks like, because I can demonstrate it in different ways through leveraging technology or in person. So we anticipate continuing the work.
Okay, that's really good. And it's good to know. I think it's good for folks to understand that piece of it. The other piece, and Mr. Moore might cover this later on, is do we have an estimate? I know we've done different surveys, but do we have an estimate of how many folks will be taking advantage of the virtual learning opportunity?
Thank you, Director. I think that may be more appropriate for.
Okay.
Hi, Director Bird. So we estimate probably between 150 and 250 students who will actually enroll in our Everett Virtual Academy K-8. And at this time, we have 75 students enrolled, and it's been open for 2 weeks. So we're seeing interest and questions floating around, definitely anticipating the fall, but we will see more in July, and certainly in August, we'll see another uptick, I'm sure.
Okay, perfect. And then just my last kind of question / comment is just the increase in family engagement and community participation and input is just, I don't know another word to call it other than astronomical. And so I'm hoping that continues in the fall, but also I think it speaks to the overall strategic plan, having that community input, having those families, having the parent university, the listen and learn conversations, all of those seem to make a big difference. And so I just want to get confirmation for myself and for the public that type of communication, that style will continue into the fall.
So I think I can take on that question / comment. It is right on target. We are absolutely moving forward with aggressive plans to continue and to enhance community engagement and family engagement. We are dedicating actually one of the days in our August workshop with the Leadership Institute with our administrators to focus on community engagement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for all your work on this.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Director Nichols?
That's pretty much better. As far as my questions came up to.
Director Listening? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say thank you very much, all of you, for your presentation and all your hard work this year.
Thank you.
And thank everybody for their hard work this year. And that was my question as well. So on the iReady and math and reading to try to see the comparisons previously. Thank you.
And thank you, and thanks to everyone who presented. It's a very different end of the year report than I would have expected a couple years ago. And there's just so much growth here that I just think is so outstanding. We really stretched ourselves quite a bit and really improved a lot of systems and processes, I believe. So I'm excited once that new strategic plan is in full motion and to learn more about it this summer. So thank you.
On behalf of the Cabinet and Superintendent, you're welcome. And thank you for your support as well.
Okay, our next item of business is an information and discussion. And I see someone moving toward it. We have a third quarter financial update. Ms. Floyd, take it away. Right.
The third quarter financials are very similar to prior quarters, and so I will move through the slides quickly and with an opportunity at the end for questions if you have any.
We have 5 budgeted funds, and the enrollment for this year ended the same as previous projections at 735 FTE below budget. Our projected revenues are higher than previous estimates due to significant use of federal relief funds and transportation stabilization funds received. Our expenditures are also higher due to higher in-person costs and the federal and state relief funding previously mentioned. And our savings efforts have continued to support a strong fund balance, projected to be 11.3% at year end. For other funds, capital projects, revenue and expenditure trends are on as expected. And the balance is on trend with support from construction assistance funds from the state. Our debt service balance is lower due to continuing to pay down prior bonds, but it is sufficient to pay principal and interest per our debt schedule. ASB fund is stable. And our transportation vehicle fund will increase at August 31st when we receive our state depreciation payment of $138,000.
You can just put a 10-minute presentation in 2 minutes. That was pretty good. You can slow down just a touch next time. All right.
I can answer any questions.
Okay. Directors, do you have questions regarding the third quarter financials? Okay, I think it's, like you said, a bit repetitive from previous presentations, so I will say thank you very much for our presentation to be here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, we are ahead of schedule after a couple of those items quicker than expected, and we do have a 20-minute break plan. Should we go ahead with that at this time? Okay. We will plan to see everyone back here in 20 minutes, which is 6:12, it looks like. Okay, we are recessed. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and resume our meeting. Our next item of business is unfinished business, and we have the adoption of policy 1441 for discussion. Turn it over to Mr. Fleckenstein.
Thank you. Proposed revisions to policy 1441, audience participation, have been made based on feedback provided during the first reading in the regular board meeting on June 22nd. Revisions have eliminated the 15-minute time designation from the policy language. Revisions to the policy and its related procedure were originally proposed to allow live online public comments during regular board meetings by remote Zoom, thereby providing the public greater access for comment in board meetings.
Thank you. Directors, do you have comments or questions regarding policy 1441? And I'm going to ask, since we have it on our screens, that if you could take it down so Director Burke can be part of the conversation.
Yes. Did we agree to remove 15 minutes? I thought we still needed some sort of timing placeholder, that we were going to change the language to how we were going to.
So, yeah, I'm not sure there was an item in the Friday report that addressed that, and what we discovered in the research done was that really there is no standard, and removal of the 15 minutes allows public comment to be as long as the board chooses. So it sort of addresses the issue of the length, I guess.
Thank you.
And I just had a quick comment. And so I just wanted to thank Mr. Fleckenstein for taking the feedback. And I think this does address it. I think one of the things that I probably wasn't very eloquent in stating at our last meeting, it was just no offense to my fellow members, but just wanting to alleviate the stress for parents and folks making comments of thinking that they might have some limit. So this does that. So thank you for your feedback, and just thank you to my fellow board members for engaging in this collaborative process to get us here. So thank you.
And I too learned since our last meeting a little bit more about Robert's rules and the structure and how it does allow the president, who is elected by the board, to extend or discontinue public comment. And it also allows for any director to call for a motion to essentially disagree, and then it's a vote of the board. So there is a built-in process within Robert's rules that allows for the board to decide how short or how long to make public comment. Any further questions?
Well, I apologize, for not having a chance to get through the last Friday report, but I think just to continue with the previous discussions, since the whole public doesn't have access to our Friday report without request, so will, on our timing sheet, will we still put a minute number just to be able to order things, even though it'll be a false, it'll just be a placeholder number?
You know, that has actually not been addressed to the board, and that's a good question. And as you know, in our summer workshop, we will have a section dedicated to the organization of our regular board meeting, and that would be a good opportunity to discuss the timing, if we want to insert 10 minutes, or, you know, typically we don't have a lot of public comment, so we might want to make that a smaller time frame and then just allow the meeting to go longer if more people show up.
Thank you.
Plus, we do have the opportunity during, I guess you would say, or in the review, to find out if there is any kind of information available to staff that there may be comments coming in. So we have that opportunity then at that time to expand or shrink that time period. I think because it is up to, you know, the president through Robert's rule, allowing the expansion of that period of time, and with consensus from us, you know, sitting up here, I think that's a good, I guess you would say, opportunity for us to alleviate the 15 minutes every.
Okay, there's no further question. Does this get moved to the next consent agenda, or do we call for a motion to adopt?
This is the second reading, so this is the adoption.
Okay, and at this point in time, I'd like to call for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Policy 1441 as amended.
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The changes are adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to new business, and item 14.01 is school resource officer update, and I think you gathered quite an impressive amount of information over this past year that you were ready to share with us.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to. Here and share screen. Jared would be proud of me that I can pull that off. Okay. Thank you. So good evening, and thank you again for the opportunity to share some information tonight and provide an update on the School Resource Officer Program as it pertains to new legislation in House Bill 1214. So that's the real difference tonight from previous reports, is to really highlight at a certain altitude what those changes are and impacts to the SRO program, and actually expansion of some requirements under House Bill 1214. Instead of saying House Bill 1214 about 15 times, I'm just going to say 1214 just for short. It takes effect July 25, and it's important to note at the outset what the bill itself acknowledges at the very beginning, and that is recognizing the disproportionate impact that interactions with police have on youth of color and on Black youth in particular, and we share those concerns and want to make sure that all of our partners are prepared and contribute to the establishment of a safe environment for all students. So we wanted to highlight a few key elements of the bill that was not in the previous statute. And the previous statute was relatively new itself. It was in 2019-20. So 1214 includes all safety and security services personnel, whereas previous statute referred exclusively to school resource officers. 1214 expands training for all safety and security personnel. It specifies the type of data that needs to be collected and reported publicly through OSPI. It requires policy language updates to reflect the bill, which also coincides this evening. Mr. Fleckenstein's going to discuss that later on this evening. We'll also discuss community engagement, including an overview of stakeholder perceptual feedback, which we have not had in the past. And a status update on the agreements with the 3 law enforcement agencies with whom we partner. So as you're aware of those entities in the city of Everett, the city of Mill Creek, and Snohomish County. As mentioned earlier, the legislation takes effect on July 25 of this year. And new safety and security staff are to complete training series through the Educational Service District. So that's new. I'm going to call that the ESD for short, which is informed by the state's School Safety Center and School Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. So there are 2 state entities that are informing the training modules that are going to be administered by the ESD. It requires training within the first 6 months of the position, and it requires 2 days of on-the-job training with experienced staff. 1214 also includes the 13 training subjects the ESD will focus on, which align with that previous legislation. So the topics you can see there: constitutional and civil rights of children in schools, child and adolescent development, trauma-informed approaches, recognizing and responding to youth mental health issues, educational rights of students with disabilities, bias-free policing, and cultural competency. There are 13 total, and here are the remainder: local and national disparities in the use of force and arrest, collateral consequences of arrest, alternatives to arrest or prosecution, and pathways for youth to access services, without court or criminal justice involvement. And that language right there, I just want to highlight, is prominent in policy in that the SROs and safety and security staff are designed to keep students away from the juvenile justice system. De-escalation techniques, state law regarding restraint and isolation in schools, FERPA requirements, and restorative justice principles and practices. It's just important to note, and I was alluding to earlier, referring to the previous training modules in the previous statute. And for the 2021 school year, every SRO agreement that we had, all three, contained amendments to make sure that it was aligned to the previous statute that had those training requirements referenced, and including the Snohomish County agreement, which affirmed in that amendment that the SRO assigned to the district was trained in compliance with RCW 28A 320-124. Just as in previous legislation, there are provisions for annually collecting data to be reported, and House Bill 1214 expands these reporting requirements to include, and you can see them there, the total number of safety and security staff working in the district, the name of the law enforcement agency or agencies. And this is key right here on this third bullet here, the descriptions of each incident where safety and security staff were involved. So again, that's expansion. It's not just the SROs, but any adult that we would consider to be safety and security personnel, campus security officers, even nighttime security. We have a very small staff, but nighttime security as well. Any incident that resulted in student discipline, use of force against a student, or student arrest. And these are to be disaggregated by race and special program status, like by special program status, meaning special education at 504, and then the number of complaints filed against safety and security staff. This is also a new development. OSPI will make these annual SRO agreements and this information publicly available. So we will be required to post that annually. As I was mentioning earlier, policy and procedure language is also expanded to include safety and security personnel. It's important to note that our policy language continues to emphasize the unique role of safety and security personnel as building positive relationships with students. It specifically calls out, and that's also true in House Bill 1214, it's prominent there, particularly at the beginning as a basis. It calls out specifically that their presence and involvement is to be supportive, leading to prevention, and is not to merge into discipline or other roles that are uniquely set aside for administrators. Under HB 1214, the agreements must be annually reviewed and adopted by the school board. The district must be involved in SRO hiring, placement, and evaluation, must confirm training requirements completion annually, and as we've been doing with our community advisory group, involve parents, students, and community members in these processes. This school year, as mentioned earlier, the board received presentations on the SRO program in July it was late July last year, and then again in December of 2020. We held Let's Connect session with the community in November, and we convened the community advisory group meetings in February, April, and June of this year. Joy Grant, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, convened a high school student focus group rotation at each comprehensive high school in May. And our goal in engaging the community on in this topic, sort of writ large, is to strengthen relationships and understanding of perspectives, welcoming all voices, so as to inform best practices for safety and security personnel. Shifting a little bit in gears here to the Panorama Stakeholder Survey in May, which was given to students, parents, and staff across the district. This survey is robust. It was close to 100 survey items, and it focused on all manner of student engagement, sense of belonging, inclusion, perspectives from these stakeholders on learning during the pandemic, and many, many other topics. And we're just starting to scratch the surface on analyzing that data when it's closed here. And plan to continue to do that in earnest throughout the summer and into the fall. In gleaning stakeholder perspectives on SROs, students were asked 3 questions in this survey out of 100 or so. Parents were asked 2 questions and staff 1 question to SROs. And these questions were developed by the Panorama organization, the nonprofit, because of their national reach and expertise in developing survey items. In answering the question, how safe or unsafe do you feel having an SRO at school, almost 6,000 students in grades 6 through 12 responded, and 74% responded favorably. And so you can see on the far right there that favorable responses correlate with the green responses in the bar graph, very safe plus somewhat safe plus slightly safe, which is their methodology. Panorama calculates overall favorable responses by subtracting this, so you can see my school does not have a school resource officer. They actually subtract that number there, the 432 from the overall denominator of students responding to the question in order to derive the overall percent positive there. And Panorama noted you could see that 7% responded that they didn't have an SRO on campus, and some early thought on that from the community group and others was that some students, perhaps they were 6th graders opting for remote and maybe didn't know that they had an SRO on campus because they weren't back. You could also see a range of responses disaggregated here by race and gender for this question. For the question, how comfortable do you feel about being around your SRO? 57% students responded favorably, with a substantive number here. You could see 27% responding somewhat comfortable. And like with any perceptual data, as I mentioned earlier, as we continue to analyze the data for multiple areas across the survey, we're encouraged to ask more questions, test the assumptions that we're seeing. As we begin to make inferences, low-level inferences that will inform, at this point, how we build positive relationships in a safe, inclusive environment. And that cross-cuts beyond this area in multiple items in the survey as well. Interesting that the 80% of parents responded to the same question, and that question was asked in a parallel fashion. 80% responded favorably to the question of how their child feels around the SRO being in campus. You can see that at the bottom there. The last question about SROs posed to students was, how helpful is it to have your SRO at your school? And 53%, responded favorably. And again, with a notable number of 29% responding somewhat in that category. Parents and staff were asked a parallel question, but slightly different, and how important is it to have an SRO at your child's school, and in the case of staff in your building. 62% of parents responded favorably, and 66% of staff responded favorably. So next steps. The purpose of the presentation was to provide an update on House Bill 1214 and its requirements, and how those the agreements will be constructed to align to 1214. These 3 agreements, with the City of Everett, City of Mill Creek, and Stonebridge County, are currently being reviewed at each respective agency, and they'll be ready for your review in August and presented for your consideration for approval on August 24th. We look forward to continuing the Community Advisory Group quarterly this upcoming 21-22 school year. The Community Advisory Group, as mentioned previously, is a very diverse group of folks. About 15 students were invited, 15 community members, and 15 staff. And in helping us inform best practices and strengthening relationships and understanding, again, with our law enforcement partners, and they do attend those meetings as well. We plan to continue to convene students and trusted adults on campus, school leadership, and SROs at each school to ensure that that we take a listening posture, one that is dedicated to listening and being responsive to the needs and perspectives of students at each school. Other ideas that we'll be exploring are to ensure that students know their rights, both on and off campus. And this would likely be led by someone outside of the school with knowledge of the judicial system and the rights of students, and they'll be able to host those sessions for students and families at respective schools. We are also considering commissioning a multi-year study on the safety and security assets writ large again, including SROs, which would include a deeper dive into perceptual data, incident data, and services that safety and security personnel provide throughout the district. That concludes the presentation. I invite your questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I would go ahead again and ask you to pull the screen down so we can see Director Bird. I had a question just about the community advisory group. You mentioned the makeup being students, community members. I think, is there staff?
There are staff.
The staff, okay. And would you say, without knowing, I mean, just a general response that the diversity of that group is reflective of the diversity of our students?
Yes, it is, without a doubt. The one challenge that we have, and just transparently, is that the turnout for students in particular, as opposed to community and staff, was lower. All three meetings, and we kind of concluded a couple things. One, and one student actually told us this, is that, and while we appreciated the students that showed up, they're tremendously valuable in their perspectives. One of the students mentioned that they believe that students affiliate with their school in holding school small group conversations would actually probably be more fruitful, which is one of the reasons why Joy and her team going out to talk in a round circle where students would perhaps feel more comfortable rather than getting on a Zoom with district, kind of in a more formal district level way. So we're going to try to do both next year in terms of keeping the invitations going and inviting that same group of kids. In those that graduated, we would get referrals from principals and others to join, and continue those small group discussions in the schools as well. Because again, we hear more than anecdotally that they affiliate with trusted adults at campus, their own SROs there, they know them by name, they can speak a little bit more candidly and concretely rather than abstractly.
That seems like that would make more sense. And then, just Zoom burnout. I know my
Like that
son,
too.
even if it was something fun, he was just done at the end of the day, and those extracurriculars were a little bit trickier. So hopefully that won't be an impact next year as well. At this time, I'd like to open it up to directors for your questions or comments.
I did have a question. I was going to ask a question on the advisory group. When you talk about students, and I appreciate very much what that one student said, because they do function very close to their own school. How many students across each comprehensive and alternative school was that involved in the advisory committee? But my question goes even deeper. How many parents in different communities were in attendance at that advisory committee?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second one first, and if I forget the first one, remind me. It was proportional across the three regions, north, central, south. It was proportional to high school and middle school parents. We even had a few parents who had attended the Let's Connect meeting that had no secondary students, but were projecting where there's in the feeder pattern where their students might go, and we wanted to include those voices as well. And so the second question, so very distributed across the different regions, and very diverse. With respect to the students, one student came the first time, and two, I think, the second time. And the third time, I think we had one. So again, we made personal calls between that first meeting and the second and the third. But after school's tough. Zoom is tough, after school is tough, and that was the feedback that we were getting was, and Joy had better turnout in her smaller groups. Not standing room only, it wasn't that. I don't have those exact numbers, but it was better than what was turning out on Zoom.
Yeah. Thank you. So, a couple questions here. So back on slide 3, it says 2 days of on-the-job training with experienced staff. Does that mean other SROs? Does that mean district staff?
The bill doesn't specify, Director Nichols, and we think it is experienced staff. So in our case, it might be the SRO supervisor, it might be, it may be specified by the ESD when they come out with the actual methodology of how they're going to roll that out. To date, if that's not been constructed. Matching what's on OSPI to what is in the bill right now is almost exhaustively in the slides that were shared tonight. But that particular question isn't specified.
So what about, under reporting requirements, the last one, was other school safety and security information required by OSPI? Is that enumerated, or is that just used as a catch-all for anything they decide on?
I think it's the latter. I looked for more specificity on that too, and I couldn't find it.
And then these roundtables that we've been doing, that Joe's been doing in schools, are the SROs present?
Yes.
Why?
That's a good question. I think the way that we constructed those, initially at least, was to build bridges, build positive relationships. I mean, looking at the language in the past 2 bills on this subject, the prominence of the bridging and building those positive relationships is in the bill language. And so we believed maybe it was a judgment call to have those folks present.
So let's imagine that I'm a student in this district that's had several negative experiences with SRO, and they're having this roundtable to express opinions and learn about the SRO program and stuff, but there's the SROs there. How likely do you think they're going to be to come out to that roundtable? So if we do that again, as we continue to do that, we need to continue to look at letting students express themselves without somebody who's potentially, traumatizing them. So, and then the last thing I'm seeing here is that, or the last thing I'll say on this, is that a lot of the data that they're mandating that we collect is great. It's insane to me that we haven't been collecting this data for the duration of the SRO program. Because we don't have any data on efficacy, right? And if you're looking at reports from the students, you're averaging that out. Students are giving the SRO program like a C- overall, when you're looking at those 3 measures as their grade of effectiveness. But that's not really what this is. That's not really what that is. It's just those are perceptions, right, of people who actually responded. But we don't know how many students were diverted from criminal justice systems. We don't know dollar for dollar what we're spending, if that is a good use of our money or if it's better invested anywhere. So to me, the fact that we're not creating, or that we haven't been tracking this is not only fiscally, but kind of morally irresponsible on our part. So going forward, we need to do that multi-year study. And we need to look at more data than is required by the law. We need to come up with effective efficacy measures to see if this is a good use of our money as guardians of the public purse. But also, we need to be able to measure the help or harm of this program.
Dr. Nichols, can I address I appreciate all 3 of those perspectives and appreciate the feedback about the likelihood of somebody's feelings coming into a round circle that they have feelings of trepidation, and we need to be aware of that. So thank you for that feedback. I want to make sure that you, in terms of data collection, let me give you just a slice of data collection processes, and that was aligned to that previous legislation, and just the types of things that we are collecting. I will say, as I read just a slice of it from 1920 and 2021 school years, I don't know that it addresses the return on investment question you're asking, but I just do want to just establish that there has been data collected in sort of two different strands. One are incidences where police are called that lead to discipline. That's exactly what House Bill 1214 is asking us to do, which is interesting because and they're asking us to disaggregate that. So we were able to do that in 1920. There are 29 incidences that we have on record that required a police referral. Let me back up. I don't know that I would say required a police referral. A police call was made for assistance. And these are things such as assault, battery, fight without a major injury, threats, dangerous behavior, drug and alcohol, harassment, firearm or other weapon, non-compliant, abusive, vandalism, and instigating a fight. Those are the probably 12 areas where police were called to intervene.
Do those have outcomes data as well from those interactions?
Those have notes on discipline outcomes. The requirement to list whether or not an arrest was made was put into this upcoming bill. So and we can cross-reference that with what our police agencies have as well. So I think I just wanted to, and of course in the 2021 school year, it's a fraction of those 29. It's I think 7. So I'm taking in what you're talking about around return on investment in particular, and the efficacy and effort pieces.
And I'm mostly concerned with that. So we need to have some metrics here that I have yet to see. So if we have that data, please send it to me. I would love to see it, because I have yet to see anything in these conversations that tell us how effective the SRO program is going to be.
I think the point I was making about the data collection and the ability, and I think I'm resonating with a point that you made about whether or not that led to certain prevention. So the correlative effect of these calls against other data points that would show that because the police intervened, therefore we had more positive responses in other areas.
Well, not because the police intervened, but that the police were taking, that they were providing avenues that were not judicial avenues, right, for support for other things, that they were actually doing what they're here to do. Or is every time there's a police contact is an harassment. Like, to me, that's the data I want to know. I want to know if having these armed folks on campus has made our campuses any safer. Have they reduced the amount of, the drugs that are dealt in and around the area? Are they reducing the amount of violence on campus? What is the actual net outcome for our district?
Big question.
Thank you.
The calls to police for the 1920 school year, are they actually decreasing the calls to outside police? Would that be one of the metrics?
That could be a metric.
Yeah, so metric. Yeah, so are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. When it comes to the panorama data, was that comfortable and helpful? And that is perception, but I just wonder if those are opportunities for making kids, is there a need for more comfort, for them to see as more helpful? And so just a question, but then for the parent data, do we have demographics on the parents to understand where their perception is coming from and their community?
We actually do.
We do?
We do.
Because it'd be interesting to see if that disaggregated, I think, to see if it's, is anything driving it? If white driving and black driving and something driving the number?
Yeah, I can give you a high-level overview right now on
Okay.
that, just a high-level overview. It's an interesting question, and it's affected by low N size too. And the idea that,
More than 1,000 people?
well, in fact, if the N is low, Panorama, and this is true across the board for every one of their items, that they would either confidentially protect and put it in that area, or in some cases, race not listed, right? So I think I'm getting at your question.
Big
Dr.
buckets?
Mitchell. Sorry?
Are there big buckets of race?
Well, again, kind of this initial, and again, we are starting to unpack the Panorama data on so many levels throughout the summer and fall. The 81, on that particular question, how important is it to have SROs on campus? 81%, this is parents now, is the highest. Parents identifying as Black African American is the lower favorable response, on average, is 56%. Parents identifying as white is 2 percentage points higher at 58%. So you see kind of a range of 81% is the highest, but race is not listed. Confidentially protected is 74%. Black African American, parents identifying as Black African American is 56%, white is 58%. Parents identifying as Hispanic is 18% more favorable than Black parents and white parents at 74%. So there is a range there.
So there are opportunities even with the parents understanding and us listening to them for those diverse groups.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And this is something that our community advisor group would want to take a look at. The question on how comfortable does your child feel around SRO? 97%, this is parents now, 97% is highest, but again, race not listed. Confidentiality protected is 83. 2 or more races is the lowest at 69. Parents identifying as Black is 75% on the question of comfortable. Parents identifying as white is 82%. Parents identifying as Hispanic Latino is 80%.
And that's interesting though, because the parents identifying as Black is almost 20% higher than the students identifying as Black on that question. So that is an interesting correlation of the kids actually being in the school and the parents' perception of what's happening in the school.
That's true across all categories,
Okay.
right? Because the overall number for students was 57%, but the parents on average was 80 on average.
Yeah, I was just looking at those subgroup numbers, so thank you. Another question, pulling up of Director Nichols' question about efficacy. I've asked for, and I'm so glad that we have a social worker here, that we're adding social workers, an opportunity for some of those interventions to happen to the home. Is there how are our social workers going to work between counseling and SROs and police to help support the students and the families? Has that been delineated out to best help the needs of the students and their families?
It hasn't been delineated out formally, but it's certainly been top of mind, particularly the intersection of their work that you mentioned has absolutely been top of mind. Mm-hmm. And we're also mindful that each of them, we're also mindful and had several conversations that we would never want an SRO or security personnel to act as a quasi-counselor in those counselor roles, or social worker in those social roles, and be very mindful even in well child checks that because of your positionality, because of your uniform, you carry with you a certain, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but we're cognizant, and our SROs are cognizant that each of those roles play something distinct and complementary.
Well, that's where it is that having that the social worker resource, I think is essential in each of our schools. I know we're hiring 3, but I just gave you. So that's the extent of my questions. Oh, and also one statement. Thank you for clarifying the snow counting training. I don't know if we can get that out to Mr. Glazer, but that caused me great pause when he said that. So the fact there is not an exception for them?
There is not an exception for them.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Excuse me, we have, you mentioned, information regarding 2019, the number of times in which these officers get called. Do we have that information for at least a few years prior to that we can actually, and I'm sure we may have, if not requested from each one of our SROs, if an arrest was made during that particular call? Do we have that data?
We have some of that data prior to when the RCWs began to require it. And which is one of the reasons why we're exploring the notion of a deeper dive study, a multi-year study, to really take the pieces that you're mentioning in a longitudinal way and looking at that and looking at ways to cross-reference other data points to answer the efficacy question, or to get closer to it.
Dr. Bird?
Yeah, thank you. And I've got just a couple of questions. And one, I just wanted to thank Director Nichols for bringing up just the power dynamics. And I think in conversations around SROs and policing, especially as it relates to students, we always have to be mindful of the power dynamics in all of those situations. And the other thing that I just wanted to clarify is with this new data collection requirement, there won't be, and I don't know a better way to put this, but there won't be two sets of books. Is that what I'm hearing? Because and just to contextualize that statement, as a parent, within 2 days of being new to this district, it was obvious that there were two sets of books, right? Like there was a collection that was being done at the school level that wasn't as transparent as the collection being done if, for instance, a student called 911. So will that process and practice end because of this new data collection requirement?
It will. So it will get a lot closer to streamlining that data in one place because of its specificity in cross-referencing those pieces on incidences, and it's narrowly tailored there in terms of collecting data on incidences that resulted in student discipline, use of force, or student arrest disaggregated in those ways. That doesn't preclude a police officer from keeping their own data and logs. And you're right, I think that's the nature of the question, to cross-reference those things, and they should match.
Yeah, well, and I think as a parent, if you have a student that is, let's say, assaulted by another student on campus and it's dealt with by an SRO versus a student being assaulted on campus and 911 is called, that's where we have in the past gotten to that two sets of books. So it sounds like now both of those incidents would be collected and the community could see some type of data from the student that there was a student assault on campus.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Yes, and cross-reference to in those incidences where you could have both. You could have an SRO being a first responder, and then cross-reference data that would show in an unlikely event that there was some other law enforcement involvement. We could, because it's date and time stamped, because we could absolutely cross-reference this.
Okay, so that was my first question. The other thing that I want to clarify, this sounds like a lot different than where we were pre-COVID. Or in 2019, I guess that's a better way of putting it. So it sounds like with our SRO program, both because of state law changes, but also because of our district looking more detailed and in depth at this program, it sounds like this is going to be a significant difference. And I just want to clarify for myself and maybe for folks in the public who are just trying to figure out what's changed or will change. So we've got a community advisory group that's giving input into this SRO process. And that wasn't the case in 2019, is that?
That's absolutely correct. It was established to align with the previous RCW on this, and it remains intact in House Bill 1214 as well.
Okay, and so that'll stay. And then the other two pieces that I thought I just want to make sure I understood is that we'll be looking at potentially doing some trainings for our students or having that available so that they'll know their rights. And I just want to clarify that because we don't have our student board members tonight, and it was one of our board members who I think during one of our SRO presentations brought up the fact that there was kind of a disconnect between what she was seeing in that presentation and what she was seeing on campus with the SROs. I think it was our board member from Jackson. And so now it sounds like the district proactively will be going out potentially and doing these students knowing their rights around SROs. So that's something that didn't happen in 2019. Is that so?
That's correct. No, that's
I just want to clarify that. And then the other piece of that was this comprehensive study, because I think it sounds like my colleagues on the dais tonight are having that same question of, where the data points, and to Director Nichols' point, the panorama that we just did, if you look at those numbers, yes, the majority feels somewhat comfortable, but that still isn't, you still have anywhere between 20 and 40% of students and parents not feeling comfortable and not feeling okay. And so when we do this comprehensive study, will that allow us to dig deeper into maybe the services we're providing, and then also the perception and maybe the actual feelings of students who are around our SROs?
absolutely. We envision it being both quantitative and qualitative analysis with lots of voices from those different stakeholder groups, right? More broadly applied and looking at themes and patterns in the service of making conclusions for improvement and conclusions in any number of those areas. Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then just lastly, it sounds like this sounds fairly organic, because it seems like you pivoted to do kind of more of those student and building campus-centric engagement with students versus having it be district-centric. And so that pivot is telling me, and I hope I'm right, that this is an organic process, that when you see something that's not working, as we delve deeper, you'll pivot and change to what potentially will work. And I think with that campus-centric approach, it's important because we do deal with 3 different law enforcement agencies. So students on different campuses are going to have different perceptions. So I guess my question to that is, as this progresses, will we continue to be agile and organic in our approach to looking at the best way to keep our students safe?
Absolutely. Those are core values in this process that we want to make sure are transparent and are evident, and that's absolutely at the center of the work.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. It was excellent.
Can I ask one more point? Because it's talked about when you said that those 6th graders might not even, if they were remote, might not even know. I wonder too, like when, because I was at Kenny Creek to Gateway to Jackson, and we did not have a sheriff's one out at Gateway when my daughter was at Gateway. If there is an opportunity for 5th grade parents, I don't know if it already happens, but those 5th grade parent orientations to maybe know that, if there is a police officer or a sheriff at the school, do you have questions? Is there, kind of introduction that could be made, student rights to those 5th graders? I just thought of it as an opportunity.
Sure.
For those 5th grade parents who are nervous with that next step.
Absolutely.
I think I was just gonna, mine is really not a question to be answered tonight, but as I'm thinking through this program and I'm hearing, Director Nichols talk about the accountability on the data, which I greatly appreciate, and we have new social workers coming on board. And, I look at the SR program as a piece of student safety, both physical safety and mental health safety. And when we have social workers coming on board, and we have counselors in our schools, and we have SROs, my question really is around how do they understand what each other's roles are and those lines, and how do they work together for a particular student that maybe has mental health issues that potentially becomes an SRO situation down the road, and where is that intersection, I guess? And what does that look like now that we're adding personnel, and the program's changing and some of the training's changing? I mean, does the counselor understand what the training looks like for an SRO? And does the SRO really understand what the counselor's role is, or what the social worker's role is gonna be? And so I would love to better understand that relationship, because I really see it as a team approach to school safety, mentally and physically.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely,
Understood.
absolutely. And
We're hung up
interdisciplinary team.
on, catching or really understanding the metrics on the SRO program, but we need to understand the metrics on, our social workers, and where are they being impactful, and are they producing the results that we're hoping they do, so that we can adjust that program? Or, are counselors given the opportunity to do more counseling? We've always had a shortage, and they always are in demand with the student body, and so anyhow, it's more wonderings, and I'm just kind of talking out loud here, but as we change and grow these different programs, I just really like to better understand how they work together cohesively.
I just wanted to reemphasize that, there's a lot of demands put on us by the state legislature as far as data, things like that. But there are certain times, and this is one of those times where we need to be more proactive and go beyond what the letter of the law is in that data collection. So I would encourage you to really, put on your science hat and be curious, and in this study, really ask all the questions and see which ones net us results.
Thank you.
And actually, I just had one more little statement too, just based on President Mason and what Director Nichols said. I know you've Dr. Scott, you've talked about the study and a comprehensive study on SROs. I just want to be mindful that we're talking about something super specific, which is having people on our campuses with badges and guns. And I just really want to be mindful of that process. For some of our kiddos is trauma inducing. And as we look at the data, for me as a parent having kiddos in our high school, the number one question for me is are they safer with these guns and badges on campus? And I think that all of our programs, in terms of social emotional learning and counseling, are so important. And they do interplay, and there's so much intersectionality with those programs. But I think for me, the data, the meat of it that I really want to understand is it appropriate to have weapons on campus in order to keep our kiddos safe? And I just want to say it super blunt, because I think sometimes when we talk about multi-year comprehensive studies, all of a sudden the end product doesn't sometimes necessarily get at the real meat of the difficult questions that we're asking. And this is a super difficult question that we're asking. And so just being mindful that this is about guns and badges on campus to keep our students safe. And is this working? And are our students more safe and feeling more safe as a result? So if there's a way to really focus on that question, that would be wonderful.
Yes, with that being said, is it at all possible I ask for a modification to the agenda? If policy 4410 can be done at this point in time, followed up by the operating budget,
First reading.
You can move to suspend the rules.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know we suspend the rules.
it's first reading.
It's first reading.
So, by general consent, we will go ahead and move item 1503.
No,
Oh, sorry, 1403, in place of 1402.
Reverse that.
Am I getting head nods, general consent?
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Scott.
Thank you.
So at this time, yes, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and if Mr. Blankenstein is prepared to do so, we'd like to go through the policy. Go ahead, please, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Proposed revisions to policy 4410, school resource officer, are to comply with House Bill 1214 that amends RCW 28A 320-124. By the beginning of the 21-22 school year, school districts will have safety and security staff working on school property when students are expected to be present must adopt and periodically update a policy and procedure that A, includes a clear statement regarding safety and security staff duties and responsibilities related to student behavior and discipline that prohibits a school resource officer from becoming involved in formal school discipline situations that are the responsibility of school administrators, and recognizes that trained safety and security staff know when to informally interact with students to reinforce school rules and when to enforce the law. B, clarifies the circumstances under which teachers and school administrators may ask safety and security staff to intervene with a student. C, explains how safety and security staff will be engaged in creating a positive school climate and positive relationships with students. And D, describes the process for families to file complaints with the school and, when applicable, the local law enforcement agency or the company that provides the safety and security staff on contract. The revisions also include changing the title from school resource officer to safety and security staff. Proposed revisions to policy 4410, school resource officer, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting. And as the presentation by Dr. Scott has highlighted, recent changes stemming from House Bill 1214 and amending the RCW identified here in blue. Each of those revisions, as required by law now, have been included in this policy revision. To just point a few of those out, a definition here that clearly defines who is an SRO and what their duties are, as in that first definition section. In the second section, it clearly identifies safety at the bottom of this second paragraph. Safety and security staff are prohibited from becoming involved in formal school discipline decisions that are the responsibility of school administrators. That statement is taken directly from the RCW. Again, another revision that is now required through the amendment to the RCW 28A through 2124, all safety and security staff shall be trained in the topics required by law, which Dr. Scott had mentioned is a process through the ESD that is forthcoming, which will also include direction for when to informally interact with students to reinforce school rules and when to enforce the law. Again, that is language straight from the RCW. And then finally, which we already have in our procedure here in Everett Public Schools, but just to point it out now in policy language, how we handle complaints around SROs or security staff here, as you can see. The final piece that also I just would like to point out on the annual agreements for which local law enforcement, parents, students, and community members would have available to them, and the agreement for annual review, which we do with our contracts each year, and have been doing so in years prior to this year. But I want to point out that this particular piece, it says the agreement will address training of SROs in the topics required by law. And our training outlines, or what we have done to date, has been captured in the annual agreements with these law enforcement agencies between the district. So those are the most pertinent pieces here as defined in the RCWs that we have incorporated into this policy revision.
Go ahead and open it up to questions.
I would just make a statement that this is one of those things, like, I know that this is, just, we're going to be ready by the university, but this is one of those situations where we wouldn't want to just do the minimum. We'd be looking at through that study where we can do more to ensure the safety of our students, the well-being of our students. So I look forward to revisiting this policy after that study.
And I would just agree with Director Nichols on that. It's a policy that I think do need to look at making just as robust as possible, but this is a place to start, and it's great to incorporate the new law into it.
I have a question about the procedures, I guess. Some of our comments here about training of other staff about this here, as a role, maybe the counselors and social workers, will the procedure be more robust in some of those relationship things within the school when it comes to maybe not safety officers, but safety of the student in the school by staff? Is the procedure for safety, I guess, incorporated here to be more robust?
Once policy is adopted by the board, the executive staff with superintendent starts to develop procedures to implement those policy changes. That is work we have still to do once this passes.
And is there a clear definition between, do you actually list out the responsibilities of school administrators in disciplinary action versus safety or security personnel?
As the procedure, pardon me, the policy here identifies, safety and security stands are prohibited from becoming involved in formal school discipline decisions, right? So until such time a police officer is either requested by administrators to assist them in an incident or something that is happening in the school of a physical nature typically, that's the only time an SRO gets involved. The only exception to that under the RCW and in here is in emergency situations. The RCW doesn't provide law enforcement to act in the matter for which they have been trained in emergency situations, such as if there was an emergency response because of a fire, right? They're a first responder for fire. So they don't have to wait for an administrator to ask for permission to assist people in a fire situation, an emergency situation. Does that clarify?
Yes, and I guess an extension of that question is, do our administrators have a clear understanding of what constitutes the need to involve the security personnel?
Yes, every year we go through that with them. However, in particular, as you have seen, policy 3300 was brought forward to the board in this last two regular meetings for your approval. The procedure related to that and the extensive revisions to it, we will be training, both Sarah Mack and myself, will be training administrators on the new student discipline procedures in our August Summer Institute.
Great, thank you. Any further questions or concerns or comments? So we will go ahead and move this on to the second reading, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item of business, we have Mr. Moore up, and we're going to take a look at the operating budget for fiscal year 2021-22. It's our first reading.
Thank you, President Mason. Very, very meaningful conversations just occurred. Transitioning to our fiscal, I would like to reflect back again about the year we've been through and just speak a little to that before we begin. Let's see, let me do that. Stop sharing, go back in. There we go. Apologies. I think it's important at times when I construct these forms of presentations to understand that we're telling a story throughout the year about our fiscal position. We begin in the fall with a 4-year fiscal outlook. We have updates throughout the year. I think we've had 5 or 6. And as we've gone through that story at our February meeting, we began to see a more favorable fiscal outlook for the 21-22 school year. At our March meeting, we had arisen to the point, or arrived at the point in which we talked about the Fiscal Advisory Council work, and that the fact that our budget going into next year really did not require reductions. We had balanced through savings and improved state revenue forecasts, that we were in a place of not having to cut. But what we did recognize is that our budget will change as a result of the significant influx of ESSER funds. And so for tonight, I'm going to start off by just getting us up to date from where we were on March 14th. We also talked about the need for legislative funding fixes. So this is the next piece of the story. I also want to remind our community who's watching that those resources are available. So a lot of information is accessible to our community in the effort to be transparent with the work we do. And so the intent tonight is to continue with that. Having said that, there are certain slides here that I will be talking about that appear to be redundant, but they're for the consumption of our public, and I tend to walk through them fairly quickly. So as we look at what we're going to talk about tonight, we always inform our community about the budget development process. We talk a little bit more about how the legislature concluded, because that was the biggest question mark we had as we walk through the year, is will they respond to the major funding issues? And then also, how are we using ESSER dollars? And then finally, Ms. Floyd will come up and show us kind of the side-by-side of how the budget will look. I want to emphasize there's a couple of things that are different this year. I think I've already mentioned that to our community that we definitely go through an annual cycle, but in this particular year, our annual cycle is slightly delayed. And it really has to do with, these are all the RCWs that are applicable to the work we do. And each year we have a first reading because we need to make available to our public our plan for the next year. And at times it is our final plan. But tonight it is a first reading. And the first reading is somewhat different because OSPI themselves were delayed in providing the actual physical budget document we refer to as the F-1905. In addition, with the late influx of the federal funds and the rules surrounding that, we have, in essence, like in some years when the legislature concludes, we are providing you with a summary, and the actual formal document will follow. Of course, in August, we have our formal budget hearing and ask you to adopt the budget. So the next thing I would like to kind of clarify, and again, this is again for public consumption to see the depth and breadth of work that comes together to provide this document or this point in time where we're adopting a plan, and within that plan we operate. What did the legislature do? We've talked about these funding shortfalls, and in particular, a ridership on buses and in students not arriving at schools created what appeared to be a significant loss in state resources, both in the current year that we're finishing, but also in the year that's ahead of us. And so fortunately, as we work through the budget, the legislature worked through how to accomplish this work, they were significantly influenced by two things. One was the improved state revenue forecasts, but two, it was the additional federal dollars that became available to offset the impacts to us. And so they used that combination to help school districts in different ways. So for all school districts, they did fully fund transportation to the extent of an average of what we would earn this year and the prior year. So in essence, they kind of gave us a 2-year average. For Everett, because we did a significant amount of furloughs and cost savings while we were not transporting students, we are well funded for transportation. They also looked at enrollment stabilization for districts, and for many districts or most districts, that enrollment stabilization is coming from ESSER dollars. There are some districts that are available to have some enrollment stabilization funding as well. And those are generally the districts that have very low poverty levels. And then the third thing they did was for those same districts who really, they covered the costs that they lost this year, but they really didn't have additional resources to deal with the pandemic, and there's only 22 of them, they gave them additional funds to supplement ESER to be used in the way we are using it. And then the fourth area in which they did help remedy was the levy formula. For districts like Everett or Edmonds or North Shore, our levy is based upon the number of students that are enrolled in the prior year, and they recognize that loss in enrollment shouldn't impact us with our local levy collections. So in the end, we fared very well with legislative actions. I'd like to thank our legislator and our local representatives for helping us with that. It's key to us having a stable budget looking forward. Planned use of ESER. And ESER, I think I didn't mention, it is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. We call it ESER because it's applicable to schools. Other jurisdictions and municipalities have a different form of federal revenues, but I'm going to refer to it as ESER, and that's the acronym that generally used in the public school system. There were 3 different allocations of ESER, and for the record, these are what they're actually called. Every time I think they need a new acronym because it's a different leadership body that wants to call it something different. President Biden's is, of course, the American Rescue Plan, and it was signed into law on March 11th. So again, the way we use ESER at our March 16th budget development meeting, we really discussed how we use ESER 1 and 2. When you look at this chart, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that initially ESER became a lifeboat. It became something that saves us in the point in time when our resources are diminishing. And ESER 1 was $2.6 million for Everett. And again, it helped us get through the spring, probably until about October. And as we began to look at the opening of schools and the need, the costs associated with additional staff and going to hybrid and all the things that were necessary to bring that back, it too was really focused on operations. And what we see, and what you will see, is ESER 3 creates a whole new opportunity. It creates an opportunity to invest in our students through the way we can help them not only recover, but we look at it as an opportunity to advance our institutional supports for them. So we really see that being the opportunity going forward of being more focused on social emotional health and learning. So this is a chart you've seen before, but the bottom line here is this demonstrates these districts down here, Issaquah and Bellevue, they are receiving some of that support because they have very low poverty levels. Districts with high poverty like Highline, as you can see, have a significant amount of ESER. We're somewhere in the middle. You can see with ESER 2, at about 10.2 million, about 8.2 of it is there really to offset that enrollment loss this year. So it further reinforces that ESER 1 and ESER 2 were all about recovery, getting kids back in school, and there wasn't a lot of resources there to enhance what we can do to help our students recover and get a kickboard and a springboard going forward. If you think about it, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years, we can create programs and supports for students that are evidence-based, that can demonstrate to the legislature that instead of these sunsetting, they need to be continued. That's what I hear my colleagues, that's what I hear Dr. Saltzman talking about, is how do we poise ourselves for the future in so many different ways. We went through a couple of slides at our last meeting to show how ESER 1 and ESER 2 are being utilized. And that is, these are available for our public, again, to understand in this presentation. I'm going to quickly touch on ESER 3 before Ms. Floyd talks about how our budget picture looks for this year. Again, this slide, I'll simply say that one of the things we recognize, and Dr. Saltzman has clearly indicated, let's focus on student achievement. Let's focus on, social emotional learning recovery. But from a budget perspective, what Ruth and I needed, we need to know in a short period of time, $22 million, we need a plan. We need to start out with a plan, not only just to put part of it in this year's budget, but to make sure that as we begin to think about what can be done, that it's sustainable, that we are going at the correct and appropriate pace. We do not want to go too slow or go too fast. And so in general, what I've included here is just a general understanding that we have these certain allowable uses. The academic or instructional supports, they're available for us to move forward into, they're available for us to invest over the full duration of the 3 years that is available to us. We really think the operational supports, we still may need them in the fall, and we do have set-asides. But in essence, what we are able to do is set those aside, and in the hopes that as we approach the fall, those resources may not be necessary for additional filters, cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. So I've included in here a more detailed set of slides that I, hindsight, would have put in as an attachment. I'm going to conclude with this slide, though, before we go into detail, and that is to demonstrate that this objective of investing in students and in recovery of these ESER 3 funds, over 80% of them are focused on our students. The remaining pieces up here, we do have set-asides for that, and hopefully they may not be necessary, but we're prepared to cover those costs if needed. The next set of slides are really just about a summary of the investments. It's not intended to be reviewed tonight, but it's to give you and the community a flavor of what this baseline plan looks like, what its starting point is. And it will change. It'll change between now and our conversation in August. So we look forward to updating you in August at the formal hearing about the use of ESER 3. So quickly, I just wanted to, as you can see, if you thumb through those or if you look through those are available. And now, just in the essence of a long evening, I'd like to transition, unless there are some specific questions, to Ruth to come up and walk through what the original budget snapshot looks like.
I'd like to break this for a moment and see if directors have questions up until this point, since it's such a different topic than what Ruth's going to cover.
I just have one question, just because you offered it. So I'm just looking at the amount for maintenance and custodial, stay health related. Have those already been spent, or is this what on slide number 19? Or is there predictions of dollars that could be reallocated if it was needed?
These are certain investments. For example, we do have 22 portables that have inferior unit ventilators that we're going to go ahead and begin to invest in. There is a certain amount of high, I would say right now, under the CDC rules, most of these investments are called for. As they begin to relax those in terms of our ability to get students closer, if we so choose to do so, these will become available for other investments.
And then with the goal being any actually, it's a question, is the goal of any available funds to then be seen to move into that teaching environment?
That is the direction, yeah, that is the intent, is to minimize the use on this stuff, certainly ensuring that we have adequate health of our buildings and safety for our staffs, but then to transition and use that funding focused directly on students.
Director Berg, do you have any questions at this point?
No, not this.
Okay, thank you.
Just to the public, also, this is a lot of alphabets that you're hearing and seeing. But I want to, as students of good fiscal responsibility, this money that we're spending is going to be in the hands of students and schools only. So if we're getting social workers, that's going to benefit the schools. Everything you've heard tonight for about 20 plus minutes, in a nutshell, let me share this with the public. Every dollar that the cabinet and the principals and the staff decided was how do we benefit the kids in the buildings. And I just want to be real clear on that, because we've done a really good job of fiscal responsibility with this. Thank you.
Thank you. That's for clarification. Ms. Floyd, take it away on general fund.
All right, hello again. This is the outline of our budget for 2021-22. And as discussed earlier during the third quarter review, the current year-end projection is anticipated to be 11.3%, which is close to where we started the year. This is higher than budget due to savings during remote learning, as well as federal ESER and state stabilization funding. These savings help to offset shortfalls in the new budget year. This summary of general fund for 2021-22 shows overall increases in revenues and expenditures compared to the prior year budget, mostly due to federal ESER funding. We still have the underlying issue of regionalization phased down over the next 2 years. Even so, we are in a good fiscal position going into the following year, as evidenced by an unassigned fund balance of 6.3%, where board policy target is 2.5%. Here are 2 ways to look at enrollment projections. We staff based on head count, which is the first table there, October 1 head count, and receive funding based on FTE, which is the second table. Headcount enrollment is expected to be 450 students below our prior year budget, but it's an increase of 368 compared to this year's actual October 1 enrollment. Budgeted revenues have increased mostly from the influx of federal revenues, and this is a budget-to-budget look. Local non-tax has decreased due to free meals provided to students again next year, and state revenues are lower due to enrollment decrease compared to the prior year budget. Here is a graphical representation of our revenues, with federal being a larger percentage than in the prior year budget. And then expenditures increase in most program areas except special education and career and technical due to some enrollment changes, as well as reduced contingencies on carryover and so on. And you can see that influx of federal dollars on the second line. 16.9 million is what we have budgeted for next year. That does include some contingency budget. As Mr. Moore talked about, we do plan on having some of that carry forward into the 2022-23 budget year. And this is a graphical representation of expenditures by program, showing the influx of federal funds. That is a higher percentage on the expenditure side as well. And another way to look at expenditures is by object, and with all major areas increasing except for employee benefits. And the reason for that is that retirement rates are set to go down slightly next year. And again, a graphical representation of expenditures by object. As you know, well over 85% of our expenditures are salaries and benefits in the staff levy. That was general fund, and our ASB fund is as presented to you by the students on May 11th. So there are no changes here from what you saw then. Debt service payments are in line with our principal and interest payment schedules. It is scheduled to, the revenues and expenditures are both scheduled to go down based on those schedules. And capital projects fund revenues and expenditures are also lower due to the closeout of 2016 bond projects. We continue to receive levy revenues through 2022. And there's also a small amount of state match expected to be collected next year as well. Here's a list of the larger projects that technology department and the facilities and planning department will be working on. one-to-one mobile devices at 3.4 million is one of the major initiatives, as well as roofing and flooring replacements and some other electrical HVAC upgrades and relocation of portables. Transportation Vehicle Fund has capacity to purchase up to 4 buses next year. The first 2 can be purchased right away with the funds that we will receive in August 2021 for depreciation. And then there would be enough, we project there to be enough for 2 more at the end of the year going into 2022-23. That's all I have. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. I have a question about our virtual academy and how you have projected and adjusted. So for example, there's no transportation fund or costs for those students that are going to remain remote. And there's probably really no change to technology, but then there's no food or lunch costs for those individuals. How have you taken that into account? Just because it's kind of, there's enough students that it could potentially be impactful, I guess, still.
I would say that, first of all, next year is still free meals for all. And so we actually anticipate more participation in our schools in terms of meals. So it may actually drive additional food services staff based upon responding to how the kids come to our school. As Dr. Willard mentioned, the enrollment is anticipated at 250. We have 70 students signed up. When you spread that across 18 elementary schools and middle schools, it really doesn't have an impact on our transportation system. And so our transportation system will be set up to deliver students to their schools, and if less of them are working remotely, then I think you wouldn't really notice when you just spread it across the entire district. In future years, it will become a greater factor.
Okay, thank you very much. Directors, other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, just because you brought up the meals piece, and Mr. Moore, I just want to clarify with the potential for additional costs with that continuation of single summer meals. The feds are reimbursing that at the summer rate, which is higher than our traditional yearly rate. So are you taking that into account as you're doing the assessments of potential impacts to our schools?
Yes, we have.
Okay, so you do know about the elevated rate. So that okay.
We do, definitely.
Perfect.
I think no further questions, so we'll thank you very much for the presentation, the information. Lots to digest.
We'll give you an update in August.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. Thank you. Okay, that wraps up our new business, which takes us to our upcoming agenda items. Dr. Saltzman, please give us an overview.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors of the Public. At the August 17th special meeting, the board will attend the board annual workshop. On August 19th, 2021, the special meeting, the board will attend summer commencement. At the August 24th regular meeting, the board will discuss the following: Policy 4410, School Resource Officers Revision, second reading. Teacher of the Year and New Administrative Recognition, 2021-22 Budget Adoption, second reading, and then the Washington State Improvement Framework School Approval Plan goals. Thank you.
That will be another full meeting with some fun in there with the new administrators and teacher of the year. Next item of business is item 16.0. That's an executive or closed session and seeking. We do not have one, which takes us to 17.0, and I think everyone knows what that means. That is adjournment. This meeting is adjourned.